Hi, I'm Jesse Cannon. This is my point 4 cents.
I'm Dustin Boyer.
I'm Andrew Southworth.
And I'm Matt Bacon. And this week, we'll be discussing how to move an artist's numbers significantly in just 30 days. Then, after that, I'm interviewing my friend Rod Yancy from Bootleg, one of the most amazing new services for artists. Their company captures countless live concerts and lets fans buy them as a piece of merch to give them access to these exclusive magical moments. In this interview, we're going to talk about the power of live music, serving superfans, and the cross section between philosophy and the music business. It gets really deep. It's a really genuinely inspiring interview. Rod has a lot to say. He's a very smart guy. And we got really deep into just this amazing new piece of music technology that is helping a lot of artists make a lot more money. And if you want a chance to use Bootleg for your own concert, DM at bootleg.live on Instagram or fill out the form at www.bootleg.live and tell them you heard this podcast, and you might have a chance to get a bootleg for your own show that you can sell to your fans. I'm seriously stoked to hear something cool come out of this.
Then after the interview, we'll be discussing for the first time in 35 years, no hip-hop songs are in the top 40 on the Billboard Hot 100. Then behind the paywall, we'll be discussing the artificial stream lawsuit against Spotify. Then we'll discuss SoundCloud's new strategy.
So this Wednesday, November 5th, we're doing an AMA on r/music marketing. We'll have a link somewhere in the show notes/video descriptions. You can go check it out, but go there and submit your questions. And it's your chance to get just free advice from all four of us. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we possibly can. And this is one from them, someone who went in and submitted early. So if you're seeing this, go submit your stuff early because maybe you'll get some special attention like this. But Uncool Kids Club, which is a great Reddit name, by the way, Uncool Kids
That's a
Club.
band. That's
I
a
think-
band
I think-
name. That's such a good band name. I hope that's
That
the
is-
band name.
It's a great name. I
Yeah.
did see Fupo Lipa in the crowd the other day. I thought that was really good.
So, Uncool Kids Club, which I think we are all part of the Uncool Kids Club, is saying some interesting questions, but the truth is most people want to know one thing when they're starting out. If you only had 30 days to move a good unreleased artist towards emerging national, what are the three highest leverage moves you'd execute first, including who to contact, the actual pitch angle, the KPI targets that proves it's working? To help set the stage, let's assume the artist is a 25-year-old female playing alt pop/K-pop fusion living in Orlando.
So this is a lot of questions. I feel like we should target one of them first. What are you guys thinking?
So let's start with like the three highest leverage moves.
I think first, could we define like what would we consider emerging national? Like
That's a good
what would that-
point. To me,
I
an
always
emerging national.
consider. Well, I was going to say, I always consider emerging national is the first time you get a late night play. Once you get the late night play, to me, you're emerging nationally.
So you think that it's about a 500,000 monthly listener, usually maybe million monthly listener point is what we're thinking that is?
Yeah, that's my gut.
And we're not saying we're gonna hit this in 30 days. We're saying moving artists towards that direction because I think I think we'd all agree that you're not going to get anyone from completely unreleased to 500,000 monthly listeners in a month, right?
I don't know. Somber. Didn't that happen? Probably not even him.
No, he actually went viral a bunch of times before that. Like he was standing on some serious shoulders of mini viral hits before that.
Okay, so 500,000 million monthly listeners, and when you say like emerging on late night, what exactly do you mean? Like you talking like Jimmy Kimmel, or what do you mean by late?
Yeah, like if you get on Jimmy Kimmel, granted, I don't know, the state of late night is in flux, so maybe this isn't such a good barometer anymore. But I always think probably the 500 to a million monthly listeners is a good way. But I think that there's levels to emerging nationally beyond just getting streams, because you can release a great cover that goes viral and still nobody knows who you are. But playing late night to me is always this moment of like, okay, they've kind of escalated their career to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I particularly think of that when Turnstile played late night, everybody was like, oh, this is the first time a hardcore band ever played late night. And like that's like a defining moment. So I think that this is a good gauge. I could go first with what I think is the main move, which I think the biggest thing, and I've been wanting to discuss this with you guys, but my ADD never brings it up. I think the biggest thing that changed about music promotion this last year is that sparking word of mouth was always important, but became the single most important thing in every genre this year. And that means that if you're not discussing a constant narrative and discussing a constant thing where people have conversations in headcanon to discuss around you, that you're probably not going to be making this. So engineering what those conversations are is probably going to be the biggest determiner of if you get this. And if really unintelligent people understand these things you're creating in conversations and are able to talk about you in a way where they somewhat get it.
The narrative is the first thing that we tackle too. And I'll tell you, it's a really hard thing to discuss because my experience is most artists want to steer clear of any narrative that is actually interesting. They want their narrative. Do you know what I mean? Like
No.
they're
You just put it so like it's like the instinct I don't want to lead into, but I'm like hearing you say it, I'm like, nope, Jesse, your bad instinct is exactly right.
yeah,
Well,
well,
so you mean like because a lot of artists want either they want to stick to like the plain facts about themselves, or they want to keep it about the music, or they don't want to feel like they're creating something that isn't authentic. And so they're hesitant to lean into things that are actually interesting, or maybe not not fabricating, but like enhancing things that are about the artist and making them more prominent that can make them more interesting.
They're not thinking objectively about what got them into their favorite artist in the first place or what keeps them interested in their favorite artist, which to some degree is the narrative that they've created around it. People like to claim that, oh, I just like it purely for the music. And it's like, well, no, there's like other layers in there.
and it's not always you mentioned the narrative that's authentic to them. They don't want to create something that's not authentic. Even when it's authentic, if something happens in their life that makes their story interested, they're like, well, that's really dramatic, or I don't. It's almost like they're afraid of the negative attention that they might receive, but ultimately those are the discussions in the narrative that gets people to chat about you. And I'll give you an artist that I'm working with that did decide to lean in that direction, but he made it into his music. Was that he grew up in a very, I guess, domestically violent situation with his parents fighting all the time, and he leaned in, wrote a song about it, and I'll tell you that song isn't blowing up, but it's resonating heavily with a word of mouth campaign where fans are just talking and talking because they can relate to it. So his narrative of, here's one of our coordinator had this really good idea where she took a picture. It's like when you played hide and seek, and it was like kids playing hide and seek normally. And then it was like when I played hide and seek, it was like the kid hiding behind a washing machine from his parents. And she put it with the music. And that is so dramatic that most artists would be like, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with that. So, anyways, all that to say, you can create a narrative where you are like, I liked the music and then I wrote music and that's my narrative. Fine. But just understand that the more boring your narrative, the more difficult it's going to be.
Almost everything on social media that gets a lot of attention is unfortunately kind of like the most extreme thing. Like you spend any time on like Twitter or Threads or any like I mean, or even just regular like video based platforms. Everything's like the things that do the best are usually kind of more extreme. And that's because you have such little time to catch someone's attention. If you have like a subtle opinion, you're probably not getting recommended by the algorithm of the platform because it doesn't get enough reactions out of people. And it doesn't mean everything has to be crazy, like controversial on the edge or whatever. But a lot of the times, like people are embellishing things about themselves or making them more just the way they word things is like a little more like black and white than what they actually believe. Like when Jesse makes a YouTube video about like Facebook ads or the death of music or whatever, and
Oh, I never did the death of music.
they never did the death of music.
That's Damien Keys type title shit right there.
But you'll have like a thumbnail that's just like, I don't know, it's a picture of like Mark Zuckerberg and you're doing a big thumbs down or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
that
It's like
that
on a
that I
thumbnail,
do.
there's no room for subtlety. You kind of have to be extreme to get your point across. And then in the actual content, you can be like more reasonable or subtle if the situation applies for that. But
Well, I think like a theme of today's episode is going to be the biggest problem we have is people just read the headlines now and don't get the nuance, and then we get really shitty analysis from people not going any deeper. And most things are very nuanced today, if not more than ever.
So to get back to the question, so we're talking about the narrative. When we're talking about the specific moves, how specifically do you start by defining that narrative? Like, what is the first step to defining and showcasing it?
Let me take a step back though, because does the premise include the idea that the brand and the narrative and all these things are baked in? Because if you think about like high leverage moves, is that a high leverage move? You know, like, and that's kind of the problem with this question, right? Because you can say, "Here's what I would do with your brand and your music and all this stuff," but the real move is what you've built beforehand that allows those things to happen, like the narrative.
So, like, what if you like they have their narrative and they have their like kind of their brand and their identity and their vision for what they're going to be doing. They have their release schedule. They have music done. Going after that, maybe they're asking like who to contact, the actual pitch angle, the KPI target the person's working. So it sounds like they're trying to steer the question a bit here. So like in terms of who to contact, like it sounds like they're applying like who are they reaching out to? Which like a lot of cases, my answer would be like no one. Who are you contacting?
Well,
But there might be some you might have some different
Mr.
answers.
Music Man who makes everything happen in the music world. I don't,
well, I think there's like a really interesting thing, and this is basically feeling a quota here. So here's the Nina Girachi mention of the episode. Um,
I still have not listened to Nina Girachi. I need to do that.
No, you need to.
so this week, literally like Friday, Pitchfork basically put up this posthumous review of a multi-month-old record, which they don't do often. They're just basically like, hey, this is kind of the record of the year, we missed it. You heard it here first. Music influencers, my point 4 cents. But my thing would always be is the reason I always say community is the most important thing is that who you would contact is doing that research of who are the early day influencers. I got Nina Girachi on Spotify Discover Weekly, but I leaned more into it when I saw influential people that I follow that have very small audiences who did it. Every answer for every artist is going to be a little bit different of who those niche people are that are going to get the early adopters. But then you have on a music business podcast, and not to toot our horn like we did a lot of this, everybody talking, you eventually get that by converting a few people at a time who are sneezers, who talk about things regularly, and identifying who are the people who adopt early is one of the main things that gets you up to that national level, and that's why that's so important. And who you should be writing to depends on who you find in the research that you do on that.
I just want to unpack Jesse's answer a little bit real quick. The way you find these people is start by going like, who do I look for new music? Who do I think has really good taste? Because once you go from like where you're jumping off from, then you can start to figure out where your potential fans are jumping off from, especially the early adopters. And very frequently, in my experience, that will be like oftentimes local promoters who curate really good bills. In metal, an example would be St. Vitus Bar, who were very early on a lot of things, or like a very particular festival in your niche that's consistently like understands like this is exactly what works. The festivals are actually a really good way to do it because it's like public and up forever. Whereas a lot of times early adopters are going to on their personal feed make a big post about Nina Girachi, so you have to like go through their stories or whatever. So that's like a big way I try to find like what's happening. Also just studying the subreddit for your subgenre and seeing who people are talking about as like a tastemaker. And that could be a promoter, that could be an influencer, that could be a YouTube, whatever. The other piece in terms of what to write to them is you do not write to them by starting and saying, "Hey, I make EDM meets K-pop," I think, or pop meets
Yeah,
K-pop
alt
was
pop
the
slash A pop fusion.
sure. You don't write to that person saying, "Hi, I make alt pop slash K-pop fusion. We should be friends and you should say something about my music." Like that is not how this works, right? You need to like make friends with that person. Like earlier today, I texted something to this kind of influencer that I thought he should listen to, but like this is someone I hang out with a lot, and I talk to about new music. And I think that you need to start by going like, if there's someone whose attention you want to start by showing up in their comments and saying intelligent things, and then send them a DM or a reply on threads or Twitter or whatever, where you specifically go, "Oh, this one thing you did was really cool. Thanks so much." Just to like this power of the specific compliment to open the door helps a lot.
I think that all is great. My, like, big counter argument to their whole, like this, I guess, but also their kind of premise of this is, like, they're saying if you had 30 days to move an unreleased artist towards this, in my opinion, like, the first 30 days of an artist, like, you're not gonna be hitting up anyone, you're not trying to pitch to anyone. You're, like you're posting content, releasing music, you're doing all the other marketing things. You're not hitting up industry people until you already kinda have some proven momentum.
You need to create the universe.
Yeah, like if you're of a new artist, like, and you've released one song that has no traction yet, you're not gonna be hitting up people in the space to, like, do stuff yet. You wanna kinda build up some momentum that shows people actually give a shit. I'm thinking, like, at least if it's the first 30 days of a new artist, like, for the most part, in my opinion, like, your first 30 days are gonna be social media. Like, obviously, you're releasing music on a certain schedule. Like, maybe you're running ads, maybe you're doing some playlist promo, maybe you're hitting up some blogs or something, but it's not gonna be, like, contacting industry people and trying to get on festival. I mean, I guess you could, and in a niche genre, I feel like that might be a thing, especially. There's a lot of big artists I know in certain niches where, like, they were touring before they released any music, but I don't think that works for, like, a alt pop, K-pop fusion project.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't know if the premise is necessarily like always a new artist. Like I work with a lot of artists. I mean, we all do that. That artists that are kind of like midway, like they're doing things. They may be mid-level, larger artists, or even smaller artists that have been around for a minute. But I mean, if you're looking, and I think Matt, you said the right thing. In terms of connecting with these people and doing what Jesse mentioned, I think hanging out digitally. There's a famous comedian I just wanted to get to know, and I did exactly what you said where I hung out in his space. I commented on a lot of stuff, including stories and stuff. And then I posted something and he liked it and DM'd me and he was like, this is dope. And then we just started chatting. And like to me, that actually is a more organic approach. It kind of reminds me of Matt, what you always kind of push on hanging out in venues and communities. You can do
Yeah.
that digitally. But I'll say this, like if you when in regards to the premise, and if I'm looking at an artist and they came to me and put a gun in my head and said, hey, you've got 30 days, I think that pillar of outreach, like Jesse said, is one pillar combined with touch points, right? And however you accomplish either of those categories, leveraging that, like I'm going to create as many touch points. I'm going to post on my accounts, HQ accounts, fan accounts, clip accounts, and just push the song and post as much as possible. And then simultaneously, I'm going to run ads. And then also, I'm going to reach out to all of these like mavens, these people who words that people lean on to hear the conversations. That sort of like two-pronged approach is generally how I approach it. I just, it requires more than 30 days to execute efficiently.
Yeah. I guess that's a big thing. In 30 days is just such a ridiculously short period of time for to do a kind of anything, and, like, yeah, like, reaching like, even in some cases, like, reaching out to some, I don't know, let's say you're trying to get your music video featured on some YouTube reaction channel or something, like, you might be hitting people up, like, a couple months before release date, and, like, blog reviews, like, I don't know, a lot of stuff happens before, I guess, so it's not necessarily all happening in 30 days. A lot of that stuff's happening prior to the release, but
But I think the key here with the touch points is you are creating the universe. You are creating something which clearly tells the story of this is who I am and this is what I'm doing, right? Because here's the thing is when people find out about you for the first time, very frequently what they are doing is going over to your feed and seeing, hey, what's up with this person? What are they into? What are they talking about? Give me some context, right? And if your feed does not provide context or makes it unclear what you're trying to do, then people are not going to be able to lock in. Right? It's crazy because you even see this with paid ads, and the paid ads that we all tend to run, I think, are generally pretty simple and are generally pretty like, here's a clip of the music. Listen now. You know, like we're not like the guys who split the atom here. But like ultimately, even those ads, which are very basic and should be entirely focused on that piece of video content and the quality of that song, I still see them do dramatically better when the artist has more touch points, has more things going on. That could be because that potential fan saw your content somewhere else. It's also, I suspect, and just from like talking to fans, It's because they didn't necessarily click listen now when they saw the ad. They clicked into the artist profile to see, is this something I want to get deeper into?
Or
Right.
leave the
And it's
app and search
because,
for the artist on YouTube, which always makes me giggle. They
but
don't click
the
on the
Mhm.
point
ad.
being,
Yeah, yeah.
the point
Every
being
time
the
you run an ad,
artists,
you'll see like in the YouTube analytics, YouTube search for the artist's name just like shoot through the roof because
yeah.
fans are jumping over and
But
Yeah.
the point being, these people who are having more success with the ads we run, which should be completely agnostic from the content, you would think, actually isn't, because it's all about creating the universe. It's about giving people something to sink their teeth into. And that doesn't mean you
yeah,
have to play a ton of shows necessarily. It just means you need to have content that showcases who you are, what you're about,
I
yada
will
yada yada.
say like overall, that's a big trend of like the people that I'm running campaigns for who have a bunch of stuff going on do statistically have a way higher chance of having a great campaign than the artists who have not a lot going on. And I think a big part of that is just like the touch points. And because like in Meta, you can see who's a retargeting person versus like a new person. You can subtract their existing audience, but it's not perfect. Meta doesn't have every like it doesn't get perfect with like who's new and who's not new and what is the attribution setting, who has like pixel blockers on their phone or on their desktop and stuff. And so essentially like you have an artist that has a ton of brand awareness, so people know their faces, and then the ad just does a little better because the people that are seeing the ad, if they're targeted reasonably, are like, "Oh, I know this artist. I checked out their song a couple years ago and I really liked it," or "I just watched their YouTube video," or "I just saw them covered on this magazine I read," or whatever, and it matters, but there's no way to, like, quantify that a lot of the times because like, it's just kinda you have more stuff going on, I feel like you're more likely to not have a bad time with ads.
So
But it's
guys,
all
before we go, we should probably answer the KPI part of this, I feel like,
sure.
since we're getting
Yeah,
low on
so I guess
time.
KPI stands for key performance indicators. So that's the first part of that for anyone that doesn't know. But like essentially, what metric they're wondering what metric should they be tracking to know they're going in the right direction.
It depends on where you're at in your career. I'll tell you that if I'm working with an artist that's trying to break above 300,000 monthly listeners and they're focused on their streams, that is not the indicator. What I'm more interested in is SMS and email. That indicator, the open rates, that tells me that we have some word of mouth and some fans that are really engaged. Because if you're just trying to push streams, it's like, punching a wave at that point, like you're, in the ocean. Like it's just not doing the damage. But early on, yeah, the streams, I mean, that's your real metric of like you're introducing people to the music. Are they going and listening and re-listening? Those are the ones that are interesting.
I think even more basic than that, it's the amount of comments you're getting on social media.
Comments, yeah.
Like,
Well, I'll tell you why I don't agree with that is you look at somebody like Citizen the Artist who's getting tons of that, and then no one streams it because no one's
Well, what are
yeah,
waiting
they
for
what
people
are they
streams, and
saying
the
though?
funnel's broken, things like that. Like, I don't think like, to me, it's just repeated song listeners, and it is the monthly listener growing, and it is the streams per listener growing. That's all the main thing, and then on YouTube, it's just, is it growing, and is enthusiasm good in the comments?
I mostly just look at essentially the streaming data across different platforms, whether that's monthly listeners or streams or saves or subscribers on YouTube or views on YouTube of the music. Stream per listen, like the quality metrics, like save rates and stream per listener too. But like what Dustin said about punching a wave can definitely be a thing. Like if I'm working with an artist that has 300,000 monthly listeners and they're like, we really want to get up to 500,000. It's like,
We're going to spend $200 a month. Can you do it?
right. And that's a huge thing. Like if you're spending $1,000 a month on your ads and you're a new artist, you're gonna have some pretty quick number growth. But when you have 100,000 monthly listeners and a huge chunk of it's from radio and then a huge chunk of it's from recurring listeners, I'm sure all of us has had this happen. It's like someone hires you to do some marketing and the numbers go down. And then it's like, why did my numbers go down when we've been spending all this money on this marketing effort? And you look at the graphs on Spotify specifically, and it's like, okay, well, you had 200,000 monthly listeners, your radio went down by 50,000 listeners in the last month. And like this number that we can control has gone up, but like we're fighting against this just tidal wave of multiple interactions. And so you're trying to like do multiple things to cause the radio to also start turning back up and cause the fan, like the artists, listeners' uh, profile and catalog to start going up too. but it is kind of like punching a wave. Like that's actually a really good way to
Well,
think
That's
about
and
it.
how,
it's
dude.
it
And
really
well, I just want wait. I just want to say something because I've had that exact conversation, and then I know whether or not we're gonna have a good relationship. What they say after that, because if they go, "Oh, that
Mm.
makes sense. Let's figure it out," or they'll say, "But why are my numbers going down?" Right, and then I'm like, "Oh, this is we're done."
Yeah,
Because
and
it's
it there is a point when like people are like, why am I like I'm plateaued at this point? And at some point, the answer is like you have
yeah.
to do something else. Whatever you're doing now got you to this point. You have to add on some other things, and that might mean release more music or test more stuff with what you're doing already, or it might just be like you need to start collaborating more with other artists, or you need to figure out how to redo like your story and
it always comes down to what, like, to quote Jesse, I think, is like people get excited about artists who do exciting things. The primary exciting thing you can do is release new music consistently to keep people talking, right? Like I have spent there are artists in that several hundred thousand Spotify monthly range who I've worked with. We spent thousands of dollars on ads that were doing good, but could only leverage it so much because like once your Spotify pop score is like over 50, like the ads help, but it really has to be like over $3,000 to $5,000 to like really move. And then, but the thing that takes that Spotify pop like that gets the Spotify monthlies from 500 to 600 is like we put out a new song and it was an exciting thing that got people talking, fed the algorithm in a new way. And it doesn't, and Andrew, I just want to highlight what you said. And this would be one of maybe my three actions if I was trying to leverage an artist in 30 days is the collabs are really fucking important for this because they allow you to promote your music and do something exciting that people will talk about and that will access another fan base without frequently having to write a whole new song, right? And instead being like, I have this song that hits, let me go get another vocalist to show up and do this verse two and chorus two, and I'll come in and do some harmonies. Boom, that's an exciting thing. That will level your Spotify monthlies. That will level the conversations around you and everything else.
actually, if I had to pick, like, if someone said, I need the most reliable path to get from 0 to 100,000 monthly listeners within a month or within 2 months, I think my number one thing would be, like, get some killer collaborations. I think that's the only way you could possibly pull it off. 'Cause I know several people who have gotten artists from 0 to 100,000 monthly listeners with 1 song because of a collab. And usually it's like a label. Like, I know someone who owns, like, a label off of his band being successful, and he started a label, and the first thing they do with every artist they sign, collab, sometimes multiple, and within, like, 3 months, 50,000 monthly listeners, 100,000 monthly listeners, whatever.
Two biggest monthly listener jumps I've seen in the longest time were Charlie XCX when she dropped her collaborations record, not a remix record, let's get that straight, and then Pink Panthers did it a few weeks ago, and the numbers are fucking crazy.
A point being, it's about finding a collab that like really fits within your genre. That's something that other early adopters care about. You know, getting Nina Girachi on your song. um,
If she's the right fit, though, only if she's the right fit.
exactly. Anyway, these are some actions that we all think about every day that meaningfully level artists inside 30 days. Hi, I'm here with Rod Yancy, founder of Bootleg. How are you, Rod?
Hey, doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So, you have a really interesting background, right? You didn't kind of start in music, you started in a few different places. Can you talk about that for a second, then how you got to Bootleg?
Sure. I mean, you're right in a way. I mean, you are right, but if I take it all the way back, I was I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up studying philosophy of all things, and after that, none of the big philosophy firms were hiring because there were none. So, so I found myself in law school. So when I was in law school, I was, trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to make this work? And entertainment law was something that was interesting. So I spent a lot of time studying copyright and entertainment law. And I had an internship at the RIAA. This is back when LimeWire and Kazaa were just gutting the industry. So it was after Napster had been shut down, but the peer-to-peers took over, and so they couldn't be shut down. So file sharing was just, I mean, I think the recording industry was, was shrinking about 20% year over year. So I did that internship, and it was clear that music was not the place to look for a job. So I ended up going into startups. iPhone had just launched, and the App Store had just opened, and so I had one of the very first daily fantasy sports websites. So this was before DraftKings and before FanDuel. I had a company called Paper Sports, and we got some early press in ESPN and a
Yeah, I
few.
remember it.
Yeah. And anyway, we had partnership failure. We were underfunded, undermarketed. That was one of my early failures. And then I had a photo sharing app. So anyway, I'm telling you my whole backstory, but you are correct. I have had a winding road. So I ended up after the failure of a photo sharing app that was called Blurry, and one of our competitors was called Bourbon, and Bourbon changed their name to Instagram, and we lost.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, never heard of that company. So, we lost that race. I then fell back on my law degree and started a company called Oath, like, you take an oath. I've grown that company and scaled it up, and I got to a place where, I have very good directors in that company, and I went on a, "I don't work here anymore" campaign, because when I was around, I felt like people were asking me a bunch of questions that they were better suited to answer on their own. And so I really intentionally delegated and, got to a place where I wasn't needed. And then I got depressed because they didn't need me anymore. And then, when I'm bored, I typically just create something. So that's what led back to the music industry, which is just a huge passion of mine. I'm not a player of music, but I'm I guess a super fan, of all genres. I've always collected music, a playlist, DJ, do that type of thing, although not professionally in any way. But I'm a huge fan of music, and so I took my sons to their first concert, and the idea for Bootleg came from that.
And so let's get into it. So, how would you describe bootleg to someone who's never heard of it?
So Bootleg is a really easy way for artists to record, market, sell, and distribute emotionally relevant content to their most passionate fans. It's also a way for fans to collect and remember some of the most meaningful nights of their life or days of their life for that matter. And so that's kind of the high level, right? But what we do, how we do that, I guess, is we capture board recordings and we have a human software process to rapidly mix and master them. And have an app that allows a person who goes to a concert to buy buy this digital memento of the night. And it's not only the audio, bootlegs in the past were just audio files, right? They were on a CD or they were on a tape, or an MP3 perhaps. But this is more than just the audio, because the fans during the concert are uploading photos and videos and commenting, and it creates a community around that individual concert. It's the best way to remember the show that you do. And after the mix and master process comes back, the audio is mixed in, and it creates this really cool collectible for a music fan that, we live in this age where it's really hard to collect. It's really easy to listen to anything you want at any time, but you kinda have to go out of your way to collect. You have to get an antique device, right? Like a record player, which I love, but it's not really easy to do that. You have to have a place to store records, you have to ship them around. So we live in a
You have
digital.
to flip them over.
You have to flip it over. And there's something great about that, like, it's not bootleg versus records, it's also
Sure.
bootleg and records, But bootleg is a very current way, it's a very modern way to collect the music you love.
Absolutely. And so, so just to be clear, like people are buying this at the show, like it's being marketed at the show. It's not something you buy after the fact.
Yeah, it is being marketed at the show and before the show through pre-sale links, like sometimes in some cases through ticket, opt-ins if you want to opt in, depending on the venue. But most regularly, it is being sold through QR codes and digital links. People buy it at the show, and the benefit of that is they get to collaborate with the release. So when they buy it at the show, they're uploading their photos, their videos, their content, and it's creating a unique collectible. And super fans are getting a way to participate in that release with the artist that they love.
Right. So it really is kind of a really beautiful added layer. I liked your story about taking your sons to a concert and then wanting to keep that.
Yeah.
How does Bootleg differentiate from similar products like Nugs?
I think Nugs is really more like Netflix for live concerts. So you're not owning any of them, but you're able to watch them or rewatch them. I think Nugs is a little bit more video forward, where we focus on audio only. We want to be really, really good at one thing, which is audio. And there's a place for both in the world. The thing with Nugs and that model is it's gonna work best for the very biggest artists, and smaller artists are not gonna make any money. Similar to Spotify. Um, it's just
Yeah.
the nature of that business model that most of the revenue is gonna flow to the largest artist. And so someone on Nugs, like let's say they're playing 1,000 cap rooms. I mean, I'm not gonna actually say actual dollars, but I don't know exactly.
Sure.
I know theoretically that the revenue that they would make one night from selling directly to their fans in the room of 1,000 cap is gonna exceed what they would make in a quarter from if they're gonna be able to be on that platform. That's the other thing. The
Yeah.
Bootleg more open to artists of all walks in their career.
Yeah. And so this is the thing, right? Is that you found a way to monetize not just super fans, but also like the most magical moment. I think when I talk about marketing concerts, a lot of what I talk about is how what you're trying to sell is really two things. You're trying to sell the transcendent experience of being at a show and seeing your favorite artist pour out their soul. And you're also trying to sell the community of you will go and you will meet other people who like the same thing as you.
Mm.
You've kind of like, is that kind of how you view marketing shows, or am I missing something?
I think you're spot on. I think we are trying to capture that transcendent moment. We
Yeah.
capture that moment, and we're trying to do it in a way that more, gives artists a way to really reflect what they want to reflect, as opposed to a fan, throwing up a phone and trying to grab some kind of audio. Like I showed Bootleg to a music journalist, and this was in our very early stages. And so I had this minimum viable product, and we had
Yeah.
a handful of shows, and I pull it out and I show it to him, and he's looking at it, and I'm watching his face very closely, and it's stoic. He's not giving me anything. And I'm like on pins and needles wondering if he's gonna say this is a toy. Because whenever you build something, it always looks like a toy at first. It doesn't look.
Yeah.
And so he's looking at it, and I'm holding my breath, and then he looks at me and he said, "I need this." Pulls out his phone and opens his voice recorder on his iPhone app, and he starts playing moments of concert that he records. But the audio, of course, is like really grainy.
It's terrible.
It's
Yeah.
not cataloged in a way in which he can get back into it. And it was just like it was very validating for me because, well, it was at the early part of the journey where I was wondering, is this something I should pursue, or is this something that is better left undone? Does the world need it? And so that's what Bootleg is doing. It's capturing this moment that people are already bootlegging, right? Every concert you go to, you see a phone up. What
Which I never understood, by the way, because I'm always like, I understand posting the Instagram story, like that's
Mhm.
fun, but I never understood like the dude sitting there with his iPhone 14 trying to film the concert. I'm like, what, you're gonna go fucking watch that later, bro? Like,
Exactly. And that's the reason why we think video is not as relevant, for what we're doing. I mean, video is cool, but it's unlikely people watch things twice. They'll frequently re-listen to stuff. I mean, we always re-listen to stuff. And I know having Bootleg and, having a lot of my favorite concerts on there that I re-listen to them all the time. I'm at the gym, I'm on the drive to work and I'm re-listening to concerts because those are moments that I experienced, and that I can relive. They're personal to me, they're emotional, they're relevant to me. That's what Bootleg is doing, is we're giving the artist the ability to, one, earn additional revenue off of the work that they already do, and two, I don't like the word control, I'm trying to find a better word for it, but refine that recording so it's not just the voice recorder on somebody's phone,
yeah.
unlikely to be played for a friend, but instead it's an actual high quality recording that somebody can capture at the concert and then, a couple weeks later say, "Hey, you got to listen to this concert I went to," which creates, I mean, as a marketer, like it creates that viral word of mouth that um, is so hard to capture in marketing, and especially with, like, with music being available to everybody, like anyone can really listen to any time on Spotify. Yeah, we still say like, "Hey, have you heard of this band?" But it's not like, "Hey, there's this special thing you have to hear," because,
Live is interesting because music is like post scarcity, right?
Mhm.
Like if music stopped being released today, I could still find music I really liked for the rest of my life. Like I do a lot of like digging back. Like I found this Kinks record from 1969 that I think is like my new favorite classic rock record. And I discovered it like 2 weeks ago and I've listened to it 10 times. Right. So like music is post scarcity, but also but concerts have scarcity, especially special concerts, not just because you were there, but because it was a particular moment.
Mhm.
I think for me, there's certain concerts that reflected certain moments in my career, booking Arthur Brown at Prophecy Fest or something, where like my life changed,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
but that's so exclusive. You can't buy that again. It's just
Right.
gone most of the time, unless
Mhm.
we do a bootleg.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, in music, you're right. Like music is post scarcity. Live is inherently scarce. These are fleeting moments, and many of them are transcendent. And they're transcendent for different people for different reasons. It might be the concert that your wife at. It could be the first, I have been to a concert that I have bootlegged on 2 occasions, and I've had fathers come up to me and thank me because it was their kid's first concert. So, like, that alone.
That's so cool.
Isn't it cool? Like, I was in St. Louis at a Judah and the Lion show, and I had a father come up and was like, thank you so much." And I was like, "Hold on, do you know the origin story?" Like, because that's why we
No, that's so beautiful. No, because I think about like because that was one of the other things I was thinking about through this conversation is like my first concert and how I would pay a disgusting amount of money to
Uh-huh.
have that, right? Seeing
Yeah.
Robert Plant when I was like 14.
Oh, wow, you had
Like,
a
yeah, no, that's amazing. And so you've kind of been going beyond that MVP lately, right? Like there's kind of interesting plugins to bootleg. You have the commemorative tickets. I think there's some other stuff going on. Can you talk about that for a second? How you're kind of taking that exclusive live recording and then adding value?
Yeah, I mean, as we continue to work with artists and talk to their teams and iterate on the product, we're finding there's some different, things that, yeah, like you said, add value to the artist and also to the fan. So we did a festival called Woodsist, which was this magical 2,000 person festival in upstate New York, with a very curated indie rock lineup. And so for that festival, we're figuring out like how are we going to activate. And yeah, we printed up commemorative tickets, which again is harkening back to collectibles because we don't even have, ticket stubs to collect anymore in almost every
Yeah.
case. They're these electric, like they're emailed tickets or whatnot. And so we we handed everybody out a ticket stub, or excuse me, a ticket that come into the concert, and the ticket had the QR code that they can scan, which took them directly to the Woodsist landing page where they could then go in and buy the bootleg sets that they wanted. And so it's a really cool way that we've found to activate. We've done it also on headline shows. So 2000 Cap Rooms will have an ambassador go out, or the artist team or the merch table will hand out the commemorative tickets. I wouldn't call that part of the product. It's more the marketing of the product. Talk about value within the product and adding value there. We're building on the fan side a lot of tools in and around community. And it really is searching for the second part of what you said. So you talked about concerts being transcendent moments and places where you can meet people that you resonate with. I mean, I think that's basically what you said. You can meet your community. And so we're building in tools to almost create like a Reddit subthread around each concert that then rolls up to that tour, that then rolls up to that artist. And then there's also like a Reddit subthread around the venue as well, which is, then tied to that place. And so every venue that has been bootlegged, there's a feed where you can see, the photos, the short videos, the comments that happened in the room. And then, every artist has the same, and then so on and so forth. And so building in these ways in which people can connect with not like algorithmic, people that are just from whoever knows where, but people that you've actually shared physical space with. That, is one of the core purposes of the product. And also, when I look around the corner and try to forecast like what's important 5 years from now, I just believe so much in connection, like actual human connection. I think that, when I look at my kids, like a lot of what I build is for the world that I want my children to live in a way. And obviously, we all can only do so much, right? But like I look at them and I'm like, I want them to be able to collect music like I had the ability to, you know. And I want them to be, interacting with people and not just, you know, scrolling a feed. Um, and so that's what I'm building for. That's what Bootleg is building for is, and obviously we live in this digital world and there's no way to get people off of the screens. I mean, it maybe wouldn't even be good if they were. So we have to live with screens, but figuring out a way to also get people into the real world. Concerts do a really good job of that. And so marrying those and also like really accentuating the in-person nature of that, is what we're trying to do with the social aspects of Bootleg.
That's really cool. Hi, if you're enjoying this video, this is just an excerpt of that interview with Rod Yancy from Bootleg, and you're missing out on content that's only available to YouTube members. Click the join button on our YouTube channel, and you can get access for just $5 a month to 2 extra segments and our full interviews with the smartest people in music discussing how to get your music heard. Please support us as we have bills to pay to make this content for you.
So, y'all, there are no rap songs on the top 40 of the Hot 100, which is Billboard's basic pop chart that in a very weird way measures what's most popular for the first time since February of 1990, aka 35 years. That is pretty wild, and there's a lot of people doing very wild hypotheses about why this is. What are you guys seeing?
I'm more upset that 1990 was 35 years ago.
Yeah, for real.
That's upsetting.
I pulled up the chart and it is shocking. So I
So,
was mostly shocked immediately by the high percentage of Taylor Swift, which
That's
granted,
wild.
she
One
just
third of the
dropped
chart.
an album, and this happens every time Taylor Swift drops an album, but it is just dominance. Like,
I thought that album sucked, we decided. Why are people listening to it? Didn't they listen to our podcast about it?
People have terrible taste. That's the answer.
and it's yeah.
What
Well, you know how it is. The loudest people are. Did we say it sucked? I honestly, I liked several of the songs more than most of her other albums. So I thought
Wow.
it was pretty. I don't normally like her stuff though, so I'm a bad example. But it's it is kind of crazy just the dominance that T Swift has on the charts. Um, but yeah, none of this
The
is
other
what
half is
anyone would
Huntrix.
But
consider a rap song.
oh no, but
Th-
if you
yeah. There's a lot of K-pop stuff on there too. The
Which,
Hunter
by
It's
the
thing.
way,
mostly from
has rap
that
in it.
show. Like this is like a Netflix thing, isn't it?
Oh,
Yes.
dude, is it a Netflix thing? Are you not on
I
the
haven't.
Huntrix
Someone
train?
told me about it last
Du-
week.
Oh
I
my
haven't
god.
checked it out yet. Though.
Dustin, ELI 5 us.
No, dude, this album plays at least 5 times in my house every single day. I have a 7-year-old
Really?
who is obsessed with it. And it is, in my opinion, it's genuinely uh uh deserving of it. It is such an amazing album, and it's very cross genre. There's a lot of hip hop in
Mhm.
it. I know it's considered K-pop, which is why it's not part of this conversation, but there's so much hip.
There's
There's
a
songs that are like
Cardi
solely
B
hip hop.
song on here. Isn't Cardi B?
But that's
But
not the
that's
top
but it's
40.
top
That's
40.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's only the top 40. Oh yeah, and then Doja Cat is usually some type
But that
of
song
rap.
is an 80s pop song.
Gotcha. But yeah, you're right.
Still
Yeah.
not
Hip hop,
even.
and then young. I'm guessing. I don't know. Young Boy Never Broke Again, but I'm guessing that's
He
a.
is also hip hop at number 43.
Yeah. Wow.
So is it a larger trend, or is this a weird moment where there's a couple of records just dominating the top 40, which seems to be the case?
So for years, people have been basically saying that hip hop is dead and it's falling off the chart dominance. But I think that there's an interesting thing here that, like many other things, is that pop music is a consensus thing. So if we actually go to chart metric, which measures everything, let's look at 2024. What was the number one genre? Oh, it's hip hop rap. Dance following it. That's the general trend we've been seeing for years. And I think there's this thing that, like, yes, you can make an argument that, like, hip hop is not producing big tracks. Kendrick's Luther fell off because there's this weird new rule that after a half a year, if you go downward from the 25th position, you do drop off if you're not showing upward momentum on the chart anymore, and they disqualify you. But, like, really the thing here is that hip hop is still a huge dominant thing, but like all music, it's gone long tail, and people are very, very into their niche little thing. But when you accumulate that niche, hip hop is still very dominant.
Still dominates, which really says more about the chart itself. Like, is the chart an indicator for trends in the music industry when it comes to the genre? No. Is it an indicator of what people are listening to the most per individual songs? Yeah. And I don't think that says anything about genres.
I mean, but music does just overall have waves, right? I mean, back in like the early 2000s, like new metal was shockingly popular, and like rock stuff was pretty mainstream everywhere. And now rock hasn't been like what we would all consider like rock music hasn't been like in the dominant in the charts for a long ass time. But like things come in waves, so like it wouldn't be shocking that if like hip hop being so dominant for so long is just like now losing its king hat crown king crown.
But it's also just the way genres get absorbed into pop, right? Where it's like like you'll see friend of the show Rick Beato talk about like, oh, there's no rock bands on the top 100 anymore. And it's like, yes, but no, because like certain elements of that have gotten just sucked into what pop music is. It's the same with hip hop, right? Like the Kalani song that folded, which is number 14, which is great and is definitely more of like an R&B song. Like it's a hip hop beat.
Most of the biggest artists, even in metal right now, have a inspiration from like Sleep Token has like a in one of their biggest tracks, there's like a bridge or there's a verse that's a hip hop verse.
That one's reggaeton, I'd say.
I don't know
Yeah,
if we're thinking about the same
Maybe
song,
but
but yeah,
I'm talking
either
about
way.
the same song.
And
Yeah.
like a lot of like following the verse was on like a lot of their hard rock charts have just straight up like rapping. A lot of things have kind of crossed over now, and genre overall, I feel like genre is kind of just less meaningful. Almost everything I listen to is cross genre hybridized fusion.
but it's also just a question of in Where Good Ideas Come From, Steve Johnson
Stephen Berlin Johnson.
talks about how genre is like the palette and then you play within the confines of it to kind of fuel your creativity, right? And it's kind of this thing, right? Like really good pop songwriters who are like listening to a lot of things and trying to take in a lot of influences and come at things in a creative way. Like you will hear pop songs that have a really sick guitar riff over a hip hop beat with R&B vocals or whatever. And it all makes sense cohesively. It's not like they're doing some sort of weird jumbled 100x thing, but it's more like, no, I'm just combining these different ideas and I'm just taking different colors and putting them into this pop palette because I think it's going to work, which is fine. And I just think I feel like this is more just a conversation about how perception of genre has shifted rather than like, oh, hip hop is dying. Because I also think that
Oh,
this year has had some of my favorite, like, obviously hip hop is going to lose cultural dominance because things come in waves, and like culture wars, whatever. But like some of my favorite hip hop records ever have come out this year.
I do think there's an interesting thing, though, that they talk about that as many genres hit their 40th year, that they really find. I think in one of the other discussions about hip hop that I've had with friends who are more like what we are in expertise of marketing, they are in actual hip hop, is what they're talking about is that hip hop's at this moment that rock, a lot of people say was around the Strokes era, which is that it doesn't really know where to go because every time somebody tries to innovate past trap, everybody's like, it's a little too artsy for me. I don't know about that. And you get these people who are just like very shy to move on from the last thing that was happening. But whereas, like, for example, K-pop is very welcoming of just like these wild, wild different directions that it goes in experimentality. Even like some of the most basic K-pop hits jump around genre and influence more than most hip hop songs I've heard outside of Travis Scott's Sicko Mode.
in this might be anecdotal, but in my experience running ads for music, the most difficult genre to work in is hip hop, and it's not even close. Most, I'd say, a lot of the time.
Can
So,
you
And
what's your
elaborate?
hypothesis? Yeah.
Yeah.
I so that's the experience, right? It's like it's the hardest to get consistently working well. I think it's two things. One, it's kind of it's mainstream, so you hear it everywhere, and people are used to being constantly fed music, either hip hop or like hip hop adjacent stuff. Two, it kind of feels like everyone's a rapper. Like I don't know what the percentage for you guys or who you talk to, but there's like a ton of people who make rap music and hip hop music. And I think there's also part of that's just because there's a lower barrier to entry. If you're buying a beat and you're just doing vocals, not a lot of other genres are like that. So there's that barrier to entry problem. But I think there's just a volume of music that is way higher than the other genres. And then people are used to being feeding it. So they're or getting fed that genre on the regular, so they don't feel as receptive to being spoon fed like a new thing. Whereas if you spoon feed someone in like an ad or something or social media, here's this cool new like alternative metal track or this like country reggaeton thing. It's like, oh, the cool, that's new. Like I don't see this every day. But if you give someone like just a regular hip hop artist, not some like unique hip hop artist, it's kind of like, there's like a
Well,
thousand of you, like
if I
whatever,
could if I could just
like
add to that though, because I have found the same thing but I think it's interesting because I was in Atlanta for a while, and what I found is that hip hop artists always wanted to fit in, right? Like up and coming hip hop artists always wanted to be very similar to the people they looked up to. But hip hop fans always crave, I think, something new and unique. And so there's this weird mismatch. While in country, a lot of country artists want to do the same thing hip hop artists. They want to be like their heroes, and country fans want that. Country fans want comfort. They want to feel more of the same. They really don't like when you go out above and beyond. But if you look at like Dax, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dax, but
yeah.
that dude is to the point of cringe. Here, let's pull it up real quick.
Now, I will say, while you're pulling that up, the times I've worked with what I would consider like a very original or fresh hip hop artist, that's when it works well. But if someone's doing what I would just call like regular hip hop or regular rap, it's so like it has to be like the best of the best of the best, like really good content, everything. Because I think it's just because there's so much. But if you're doing something truly original, like Dax's videos are crazy too, and he has these really compelling like stories behind his songs, and I don't like a lot of hip hop music, it's just not my jam, but, like, I've heard a few of his songs, and every time I see them, I'm like, "Oh, damn, this actually, like, gets me into it."
I didn't mean to cut you off with that.
That's what I mean, though, like, he's the content is super fresh, and the videos and he has this kinda creepy thing, a lot of and he's changed a lot of an artist over the past few years, but, he's someone probably from his team submitted to me on Submit Hub a couple years ago. for that song Joker that you just played. And I was like,
That
holy
song's been
shit,
around
this
for a
is
minute,
like
Yeah.
it's 2020. And I was like,
and it's
holy
still
shit, this
going
like
viral.
this gets me like excited. Like I don't even like hip hop, but I'm diving into his catalog to check him out because of how unique it felt.
I think to go back to a discussion we had earlier in the episode, I'm convinced that the number one thing right now is that if you picture the dumbest motherfucker talking to the second dumbest motherfucker, if they just say they're a bad version of this artist, who's listening to that? And if word of mouth is the number one music consumption way that we get things, it's not inspiring when it's just this is bad Taylor Swift. But when it's something different, it's compelling and exciting to hear about, and that creates conversation and creates what gets people converted to music listening and makes people pay attention. And I think
Yeah.
if you're not doing that right now, you're not going to be winning. If you're just bad Blink-182, there's 1,000 other ones.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. We are trying to get this to go as far as it can, so please start a conversation with a musician friend by sending them this episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast app. If you're on YouTube, subscribe and turn on the notifications, ring that bell so you never miss our uploads every single Tuesday. If you can rate us on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify, it helps out a ton. Tune in next week for more.